Hello, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. I thought today we should talk about Groundhog Day. It's currently February 1st, and Groundhog Day happens on February 2nd every year. So it seems appropriate to discuss it. So the very basics of Groundhog Day is that there is a groundhog, and his name is Punxsutawney Phil. We'll keep that in there, I guess, because we can see it. And on February 2nd, Punxsutawney Phil comes out from hibernation in his hole and speaks. I will get into that later, but he predicts whether he sees his shadow or not. Will predict if he sees his shadow, there will be 6 more weeks of winter, and if he doesn't see his shadow, there will be an early spring. And that's the gist of Groundhog Day. But there's so much more to talk about. So, let's get into it. Here's Punxsutawney. So, on Groundhog Day, there is a stump, and it says the name Phil, and it has little doors on it. Let's put it here. And then there is a committee who is in charge. They're the Groundhog Committee, I believe is what they're called. And they're in charge of Phil all year round, I think. But on Groundhog Day, there is a president of the committee. By the way, the committee, they all wear top hats. So I found these things that were from a plumbing project. And I'm hoping, look how perfectly it fit him. So they can wear their little top hats. Oh yeah, look. All right, come on, owl. These are from my class animal collection when I was a kid. All right, I didn't want to stay on these guys, but we'll pretend that they have their top hats. Oh, there we go. All right, so the guys in top hats come out. And what has actually happened is Phil, the groundhog, is kept in a, I don't want to call it a cage because that sounds not as nice. It's a pretty nice environment that is, indoors. So Phil stays awake all year round, I think. He doesn't have to hibernate. And they feed him and keep him well nourished and cared for. And that's in town of Punxsutawney. But on Groundhog Day, they pull him out from there and they put him inside of a little, he's got hay and stuff in there and he's inside here. So then on Groundhog Day, the president of the Groundhog Commission or whatever, I think that's what it's called, he knocks on the door to get Phil and then opens it up and he pulls Phil out. And if Phil sees his shadow, then it's 6 more weeks of winter. And if he doesn't, then it's early spring. But Phil speaks groundhogese, and only the president can understand groundhogese. And he has already spoken to the president and told him what it will be. And so the president unscrolls a scroll and reads Phil's words to the people, saying whether or not winter is 6 more weeks or if there will be an early spring. And to give you a little mental image here, here he is lifting Phil up in the air with his top hat. So there's Phil. So yeah, he would pull Phil out from the door, and I have the seal to play Phil, and he goes, "Yay, Phil." And he holds him up. Let's see if we can see Phil's shadow. So I don't see a shadow anywhere. So I predict early spring based on my seal being pulled up here. Do you guys see a shadow? I don't see one. You'd think. I have quite a few lights. So early spring. Whatever that means. There we go. So that is the basics of Groundhog Day. Now, it takes place on February 2nd because it's the midway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And someday maybe we'll have to do a video on those two things because I don't really know that much about them. The full name of Phil is Seer of Seers, Sage of, I wrote or, of sages, prognosticator, oh boy, of prognosticators, and weather I think this is a predictor. Extraordinary, or I did some extra, or I did something wrong there. Extra, I put an I there. Ordinary. I don't know. I'm still not trying to find it, but anyway. So yeah, Phil's full name is Seer of Seers, Sage of Sages, Prognosticator of Prognosticators, and Weather Predictor Extraordinary, Punxsutawney Phil. And his name is Punxsutawney. Hold on, let me grab my... Because he is from Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, which I did actually look up here. Hold on. My thing's falling apart. So this is Pittsburgh and Johnstown, Altoona. But he is from... Wait, I found it. Where is it? Oh, here it is. So it's right above the break in my map right here is Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. So I don't know, that's probably an hour outside of Pittsburgh. And this little town has become the hub of Groundhog Day. There are other groundhogs around the country, but this is the most famous one, and he's in Pennsylvania. So it's kind of based on, well, I read that there is a holiday called, I don't want to say this wrong. I think it's Candlemas, and that goes way back to ancient, like they said the Virgin Mary was after, I think it was 40 days after the birth of the Christ child, took him to the temple, and she was purified and she presented Jesus to God. And that became a thing in the church that people would bring their candles to the temple on February 2nd to have them blessed, and it would make for a better winter season. But then in Germany, that February 2nd kind of became surrounded to the, part of the harvest. And they would unlodge a badger, which seems kind of crazy. And if the badger, I don't know, woke up or saw a shadow or something, kind of the same thing, then it would predict whether there would be more winter. So then when the Germans came to Pennsylvania, and it was the Pennsylvania Dutch, they started, with groundhogs. I think they actually ate the groundhogs. They would cook them and eat them. But, and then in 1886, I read that it showed up in the local Punxsutawney newspaper or something, that a groundhog was predicting whether or not there would be more, winter. And that very next year, 1887, was the first Groundhog Day, where they celebrated it there, and then they've celebrated it ever since. And according to the committee, the Groundhog Committee, the same groundhog has been predicting the weather for however many, over 130 years, and that the groundhog lives so long because in the summer they make an elixir of life out of dandelions, and the groundhog drinks it, and that extends his life. So the same groundhog has been predicting Groundhog Day since 1886 or 7, I don't know. So that's interesting fact. Anyway, so I thought we could look it up in my handy dandy book here. See what they say, if they say anything about Groundhog Day. You guys know I just like this book because I kind of like the sound it makes. Where are you, Groundhog? Groundhog Day, page 36. Susan B. Anthony. I don't know anything about her except that she's on the coin. Ooh, this is something we should do, the 13 colonies. That's interesting. Dorothea Dix. Europe, what is this? I don't know. Napoleon. I want to see that movie. Maybe after I watch it, we could talk about him. Genghis Khan. Rubens was a question on Jeopardy the other day, I think, and they got it wrong. Okay, hold on. We're getting close. Groundhog Day, February 2nd. The legend of Groundhog Day is that if a groundhog, a woodchuck, oh yeah, they also call them groundhogs, woodchuck and ground squirrel and whistle pigs. I have groundhogs in my backyard, and they do make a little chirpy noise. They kind of go make little noises, so I can see why they call them whistle pigs. Anyway, the legend of the Groundhog Day is that if a groundhog comes out of his hole on that day and sees his shadow, 6 more weeks of winter will follow. If no shadow appears, there will be an early spring. Oh, and the committee says that the Groundhogville has never been wrong. And my husband said that's because 6 more weeks of winter and early spring kind of mean the same thing. Like February 2nd, if you start to warm up by April, you're kind of going to be right either way, right? I don't know. Anyway, I want some of this dandelion elixir that makes you live forever. I bet if you go, because now they've made it a separate event in the summer for giving the groundhog the dandelion elixir. I bet you can buy it there. I have no doubt that there are people selling it. Anyway, so there's Groundhog Day. Let's get our guys back out. I can't believe how perfectly these little top hats fit these guys. Look at that. And then Phil's little roost. All right. I can't think of anything else about Groundhog. Let me think if there's anything. Where'd I put my scissors? Hold on. Here they are. I'll cut this up while I think for a minute. I took a note here. The name of the club is the Pennsylvania Groundhog Club. And that's where the president is the one who can speak to the groundhog. And they say he's been doing it for over 120 years, and he has been accurate 100% of the time. He lives in a climate-controlled burrow. Yeah. But originally in the 1880s, they would celebrate it by having like these picnics and hunting groundhogs and eating them. So that's changed a lot over the years. Anyway, seer of seers, sage of sages, prognosticator of prognosticators, and weather predictor extraordinaire, which I think is an E, right? Extraordinaire. Oh, you know what? I bet it is. It's extraordinary. Extraordinary? Sees, oh no, Punxsutawney Val. So I hope that you all have oh, I know what I wanted to say. Sorry, I just remembered. This is Phil, by the way. He's a seal today, but if you guys have seen the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, which, by the way, as my memory serves, it's been a lot of years, it's a great movie. It's really, but what happens is Bill Murray and, that beautiful, shucks, what's her name? The one with the curly hair. Ugh, I can't think of her name right now. Anyway, I should have looked this up. But I feel like that movie came out like in the early 90s. And they're a news reporting team, and they go to, report on the groundhog. And for some reason that I don't remember, they get stuck in a time warp. Bill Murray's character does. And so every day he wakes up in this small town and he has to relive the same day over and over, which is a trope that generally in movies kind of bugs me because I get a little frustrated. But in that movie, it works really, really well. And it's funny. And his whole thing is he's trying to make the woman fall in love with him, which I know I've seen people say, oh, that's bad, whatever. Who cares? It's a movie. So he keeps trying to do different things to make her fall in love with him. But that is why now Groundhog Day has this completely other meaning that people go, oh, it's like you're stuck in Groundhog Day. And it has nothing to do with pulling a groundhog out of a hole with a guy with a top hat. It's all about just a repetitive thing or being stuck in the same thing over and over again. So I think that's funny. That movie changed the whole meaning of it, and I'm sure made, Groundhog Day a much more popular event to go to as a viewer. Oh yeah, and when they do this, like these guys are up on this stage and they do it at 7:38 in the morning or 7:28 or something like that, very early in the morning. And starting at midnight, crowds show up. And by the time they pull this little groundhog out of here, there's going to be a ton of people there. It is so popular. And people stay up all night to see him get pulled out in the morning. And when I was a kid, I don't know why, but I had a cork board by my bed, and every year I cut out the groundhog picture and pinned it on that board, and I had like 10 years worth of the groundhog photos. And he was right 100% of the time, without a doubt. In reality, I think groundhogs they actually have pretty long lives. I think they live like 13 years or something. But because of the elixir of life, Phil has lived for 100 and however many. I didn't do the math. A lot of years. So good for him. Anyway, well, let me know if you've ever been to see it, or you know any. Yeah, I have read. I think they celebrate Groundhog Day in the US and Canada, but I don't think in Europe they do. So I don't know. Have you guys heard of it? I'm not sure. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks for watching. I guess put all this stuff away. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Phil's little. This was supposed to be a tree stump. I started cutting a tree stump to use, but I need a new saw. All my saw blades are so dull. I can't cut through it. So I used a Patron tequila cork and cut the base off it. But this is what it looks like. It says Phil, and it has a little door like that. And then he's in a little like thing underneath.